Hello, and welcome to Shortcut Up CNC. Today we're going to talk about a gadget I finished up. It's called the Draw Panel Grid. As you can see here, we have the Gadget interface, and behind it we have a panel grid that's been laid out on an 8x4 sheet of material. And these are 9-inch by 4-inch rectangles. You can either use this as a rectangle square cutouts and just create a whole mess of squares or a whole mess of rectangles. That's one of the benefits of using this gadget. But the gadget was initially set up for drawing single vectors so that it only cuts a panel once. In other words, when it does the four passes on a particular tool, it only cuts on this one side of the pan. If you made these rectangles as a rectangle, you have to space them out and this, that, and the other, and it cuts around and around and around and around. This way, you can cut out a whole bunch of squares or rectangles by just cutting each vector one time. It doesn't cut a second time as it does when it goes around and around as on a closed vector. These are all open vectors, and the vectors are separated on their own layer. You got your horizontal vectors and your vertical vectors. So let's close the gadget, and I'm actually going to close the job down, and we're going to create a new job. 96 by 48. We're going to keep that single-sided, and we're going to go, let's say, with a 1/2 inch material this time. And the material surface, XY datum, the gadget is set up to be used from the lower left-hand corner. You can change that after you use the gadget and reset everything. Say OK to this. That gives me my job. Now I'm going to click on layers so I can watch the layers pop up when I use the gadget. There we have the gadget, and the gadget can be used both in the Imperial standard and the metric standard. You just change this little box right here to whatever you happen to be using in units when you set up your job. In this particular case, it's in inches. And also the defaults will be in here. And if you have used the gadget previously, it'll be the last used dimensions. As in this case, I'm showing a 9 by 4 when the defaults are 12 by 12. So it does remember the last used settings. So you can use it repetitively if you needed to. Here we have compensate per tool diameter, and there's your tool diameter that you put in the type of tool and size that you're using. And we also have clamp margin. If you want a margin put around it, you tell it how much of a margin you want. If you're using a vacuum, just put 0 in and it will create it right to the edge of your material. So let's change the dimensions on this back to the default settings. And we'll use the gadget just as it is. We'll compensate for tool diameter, center the grid when we got excess material. And we'll say OK to that. Now you notice it's going to be compensating for the tool. If we draw a line straight across here, you'll see up here in the corner that it says 12.125. It has compensated for that tool diameter. So when you cut out the panel, it'll be a 12 by 12. Right now it's showing 12.125, and that's of course on both sides. And then if you measure it in the other direction, well, I got to click here, boom. Okay, now we go there to there, and it's 12.125 also. So it does compensate for your tool diameter. Now, if you're just cutting out a whole bunch of squares or a whole bunch of rectangles, you may not want compensation. You may want to just cut them as is. But you got to remember, when you put your dimension in 12 by 12, if you're using a 1/4-inch tool, it's going to cut 125 into the material because you're cutting on the vector. So you'll end up with a panel that's 11.875 by 11.875 rather than 12 by 12 because you didn't use the tool compensation. So the gadget is taking into consideration all that information. It will also center the grid if it's got excess material. And we have separated the vectors on layers. If I click this off, I'll show you the horizontal vectors, and then I'll show you the vertical vectors. Now, to create a toolpath for this, you want to be on the vector. I'm using a 1/4-inch tool, and we need to change that, being we changed our material thickness. I don't need 2 decimals. Bad habit. All right, now, excuse me, I want to use vector selection order. So I start here where my lower left datum will start, and I choose the vectors, my vertical vectors first, and I go all the way across, and I know that I've got 4, well, let's see, here is showing only 3 passes, so it's 1, 2, 3, so it's going to end up here. So I want to take this one and this one, this one, and this one. And of course, you got 3, 1, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Anyway, you go all the way down like that, and then you find out where this last vector ended, and the shortest distance you want to go to the next horizontal vector and start cutting. Anyway, we got them all set. Now I say calculate that. And there we have the layout. And if I do a preview, it should start here and go across, and then from there down, and it ends here and goes back to your position, home position. So there you've seen the panel grid drawing gadget. You can either use it for panels and put text on it, names, whatever, or you can use it for just cutting out a whole mess of squares or rectangles. Thank you for watching Shark Cut Up CNC.